There is a sentence almost everyone has said to someone they love in a low voice while looking right at them. The sentence is, I'm fine. And often, when we say it, it isn't true. Something is wrong, sometimes badly wrong, and the person asking is precisely the person who would want to know, the person who has earned the right to know, the person we supposedly tell everything. And we look at them, the one we love, and we say the small, clean lie. I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. It's nothing. We tell ourselves these are tiny things, hardly lies at all. But pull on that thread and something strange unravels. Because if you really think about who gets the unvarnished truth from you and who gets the careful, edited, protective version, you may notice an uncomfortable pattern. The stranger on the train often gets more honesty than the husband at the kitchen table. The acquaintance you'll never see again hears what you actually think, while the person who shares your bed hears the version that keeps the peace. We like to believe that love and honesty travel together, that the closer someone gets, the truer we become with them. But the evidence of our own lives, and as it turns out, the evidence of actual research tells a more unsettling story. Some of our deepest dishonesty is reserved for the people we love the most. The question is why? Why would we save our most careful deceptions for exactly the people we least want to deceive? And the answer goes to the center of what intimacy actually is and what it costs. Start with the thing that makes this so confusing. We don't experience ourselves as liars, especially not with the people we love. If anything, we feel we are more honest with them than with anyone. And in one narrow sense, that's even true. But honesty isn't measured by how it feels from the inside. It's measured by the gap between what's real and what we let the other person see. And that gap with the people we love is not smaller because we love them. It's often larger, precisely because we love them and because we are terrified of what the truth might cost. Let's start with what the research actually found, because the first finding is reassuring and it makes the second finding so much worse. A social psychologist named Bella DePaulo spent years studying ordinary everyday lying. She had people keep diaries of every lie they told, however small, for a week at a time. And the first thing she found is that lying is constant. The average person tells something like 1 to 2 lies a day. Not grand deceptions, mostly little social lubricants. I love it. You look great. I'm on my way. Sounds fun. The ordinary fog of small untruths we move through without much thought. But then DePaulo looked at who we tell these lies to. And here came the comforting part. On a per conversation basis, we actually tell fewer of these everyday lies to the people we are closest to. We feel the wrongness of it more with them. Lying to your best friend feels worse than lying to a stranger, so we do it less, in the small daily way. And more of the lies we do tell the people we love are what she called altruistic. We are not lying to get one over on them. We are lying to protect them, to spare their feelings. That's the reassuring finding. With the people we love in the texture of ordinary life, we are a little more honest and a little more kind. And then there's the other finding, the one that should stop you cold. When DePaulo studied not everyday lies, but serious lies, the big ones, the lies people described as the most significant deceptions of their entire lives, the picture flipped completely. Nearly two-thirds of those most serious lies were told to or by the people closest to them. Parents, spouses, romantic partners. The lies that conceal affairs, secret debts, hidden disasters, the things that detonate a life when they finally surface. We don't tell those to strangers. We have no need to. We save them almost exclusively for the people we love. The small lies we spare them, the shattering ones we reserve for them. That is the paradox at the heart of intimacy, and it is not an accident. So, why does it work this way? Why is the person we'd least want to hurt the very person we're most capable of deceiving in the ways that hurt most? The first reason is the one nobody likes to say out loud. It stakes. We lie biggest where we have the most to lose, and we have the most to lose with the people we love. Think about what a stranger can actually take from you. Almost nothing. Their opinion of you evaporates the moment you part. But the person you love holds your whole life in their hands. Your sense of security, your home, your image of yourself as a good person, the future you've built together. When someone can give you that much, they can also take that much away, and the truths that might make them leave become unbearable to say. So, the size of the potential loss becomes the size of the temptation to lie. We don't construct elaborate deceptions for people who don't matter. We construct them precisely and only where the stakes are high enough to make the truth feel like a loaded weapon. Here's a strange way to see it that's almost beautiful and almost terrible at the same time. The lie you're most tempted to tell someone is a measure of how much you have to lose with them. You don't bother hiding from people whose love you could live without. The enormous effort of a serious deception, the energy of keeping a secret, the vigilance, the second life, none of that gets spent on someone who doesn't hold your heart. It only gets spent where the fear of loss is real. Which means, in a grim way, the magnitude of a lie tells you the magnitude of the love it's trying to protect. We deceive in proportion to what we're afraid to lose. The second reason cuts even closer. It's about the self we need them to keep seeing. With a stranger, you have no image to protect because they have no image of you. But the person who loves you fell for a particular version of you, and over the years, you have become, in their eyes, a specific kind of person. Reliable, good, strong, the one who has it together. And that image, the you that lives inside their head, becomes something you feel you have to defend because their love seems to be attached to it. So when you do something that contradicts the picture, when you fail, or want something you shouldn't, or feel something ugly, or make a mistake that the good and reliable version of you wouldn't make, a quiet panic sets in. If they see this, they might stop loving the person they think I am. And so you hide it, not from malice, from terror. You lie to protect their image of you because you've come to believe that image is what they actually love. Think of the person who loses their job and can't bring themselves to say it. Who keeps getting dressed every morning, picking up the briefcase, kissing their partner goodbye, and driving off to sit in a parking lot or a library for 8 hours. Because the truth, I failed. I'm afraid. I don't know what we're going to do, feels more dangerous to the relationship than an elaborate daily performance of a life that no longer exists. It happens more often than you'd guess. And it is not at its root a lie about a job. It's a lie about worth. They cannot bear for the person they love to see them diminished because they've quietly decided that the love was conditional on the strength, on the provider, on the version who has it handled. So they protect the image with everything they have. And in doing so, they carry the heaviest weeks of their life completely alone, a few feet from the one person who might have helped them carry it. And do you see the cruelty folded inside that? The closer someone gets, the more of yourself you may feel you have to conceal in order to stay lovable to them. You end up hiding most from the very person you most want to be known by. The intimacy creates the image creates the fear, and the fear creates the lie. We build a beautiful, careful version of ourselves and hand it to the people we love, and then we spend the relationship terrified they'll find out it isn't the whole truth. But before this curdles into pure cynicism, we have to be fair to the other half of it, because not every lie told in love is a betrayal. Some of them really are love. There's a kind of honesty that is actually just cruelty wearing honesty's clothes. The person who tells you your dying mother looked terrible at the end. The partner who shares every unflattering thought the instant they have it and calls it being real. We've all met the brutal truth teller who uses honesty as a weapon and then hides behind the word, as if truth excused the wound. And here's what the research shows about this. People who tell kind lies, lies meant to protect someone else, are often judged to be more moral than people who tell hurtful truths. We instinctively understand that when kindness and honesty collide, blurting the truth is not automatically the higher virtue. Sometimes the loving thing and the strictly true thing are not the same thing, and a person of real character has to choose. This is more than an intuition. Researchers have shown that what they call prosocial lies, lies told to benefit the other person rather than yourself, can actually increase trust rather than destroy it. Because what we are really tracking, underneath the literal words, is intention. When someone shades the truth to spare us pain, and we sense that their motive was to protect us, we often trust them more, not less. We trust that they're on our side. So, no, the answer to all this is not to become a radically transparent person who narrates every passing thought and unflattering observation in the name of truth. That's not intimacy, that's just aggression with an alibi. The problem, the real problem, is that the self serving lie has learned to wear the costume of the kind one. And this is where it gets genuinely dangerous because it's where we start lying to ourselves. Almost every serious self protective lie comes wrapped in a story about protection. I didn't tell them because it would only hurt them. I'm keeping this secret for their sake. I'm sparing them. Remember that the big serious lies turned out to be overwhelmingly self serving, far more than the everyday ones. And yet, you can be sure that almost every one of them was told by someone who had quietly convinced themselves they were doing it out of love. The philosopher Jean Paul Sartre had a name for this. He called it bad faith, the lie we tell ourselves to avoid a truth we don't want to face. And bad faith is the engine that lets a person hide an affair and genuinely believe they are being considerate. The deception of the other and the deception of the self happen in the same motion. So smoothly, we never catch the switch. So, here is the question that cuts through almost all of it, and you can ask it of yourself the next time you are about to soften, omit, or shade something with someone you love. Who does this lie actually protect? Be honest about the answer, because the kind lie protects them from pain that would do no good. But the cowardly lie protects you from being seen, from being held accountable, from the discomfort of their reaction, and then dresses itself up as kindness so you don't have to feel like a liar. The same words can be either one, the only difference is who's really being spared. And the part of you that wants to lie will always tell you is the noble kind. There's a cost to all this that runs deeper than any single secret. And the philosopher Sissela Bok named it precisely. A lie, she argued, is not only a false statement, it's a transfer of power. When you deceive someone, you take from them the ability to make real choices about their own life because you fed them a false picture of the world they are choosing in. And in a close relationship, that's a quiet theft of the most intimate kind. The person you're lying to is making decisions about you, about themselves, about their future, based on a reality you've edited. They think they know where they stand. They don't, and Bok pointed out the strange asymmetry the liar creates. The liar still wants the truth from everyone else. He reserves honesty for himself while denying it to the person he's deceiving. So, even inside a loving relationship, the lie secretly splits the two of you into unequal halves. One of you knows the real situation, the other only thinks they do. And that gap, however warm things look on the surface, is a kind of loneliness for both. One of you is alone in knowing, the other is alone in not knowing, and neither of you is actually together because you're no longer living in the same reality. Which brings us, finally, to the deepest reason of all, the one underneath the stakes and the image and the bad faith. We lie to the people we love because somewhere down in us is a conviction that the truth of who we are is not quite lovable. That if they saw all of it, the failures, the desires, the smallness, the things we've done, they would leave. And so, out of love and out of fear, which are tangled together here beyond separating, we give them a curated self and let them love that instead. But look at the trap we build with our own hands. If you hide your real self and let someone love the edited version, then their love, however real it is, can never actually reach you. It lands on the image, the acceptable self you constructed, while the real you stands just behind it, untouched, still convinced it's unlovable. Now with proof because look, they only love the version you faked. We lie to keep from losing them, and in doing so, we guarantee a quieter, deeper loss. We end up unknown, not in spite of being loved, but because of the very strategy we use to hold on to that love. The lie meant to protect the relationship slowly hollows out the only thing that made it worth protecting. So, what do we do with this? Not the impossible fantasy of a life with no concealment. Because we've already seen that total transparency is its own kind of violence, and that some kind lies are genuine acts of love. The work isn't to never shade the truth. The work is to learn the difference between the two kinds of lies and to stop letting the second masquerade as the first. The lies that protect another person from gratuitous, useless pain, those can be tenderness, and a life has room for them. But the lies that protect you from being known, the ones that hide the truths that actually matter, the ones that keep your partner living in an edited reality so that you never have to risk their full reaction to the real you, those are not love. Those are the slow starvation of the very intimacy you wanted. And the test between them is not how the lie feels, because bad faith makes the cowardly lie feel noble. The test is who is actually being spared, and whether the thing you're hiding is a passing hurt or the truth of your life. And here is the turn, the thing that makes all of this hopeful instead of bleak. The fact that you are tempted to lie to someone is not a sign that something is wrong with your love. It's a sign of how much you have to lose, which is a sign of how much they matter. That temptation is not your enemy. It's a map. The lies you most want to tell are pointing with perfect accuracy at the exact truths that, if you found the courage to say them, would finally let you be loved as you actually are, instead of as the careful portrait you've been maintaining. The thing you're most afraid to let them see is the precise location of the intimacy you say you want. Because in the end, the math is simple, even if the courage is not. A person who loves you while believing the lie does not really love you. They love the version. And a person who could still love you if they knew the truth is the only one whose love was ever actually yours. The whole terrifying gift of intimacy is the chance to find out which one you have, and the only way to find out is to stop hiding and let them see. We save our deepest lies for the people we love most, because they are the only ones whose loss we truly fear. But they are also the only ones whose love, if we ever dare to let them pass the portrait, could finally reach the part of us that has been hiding and lying and waiting to be known the whole time.